Gophers too much anyway. I'm just not as big of a Gopher guy or college football guy in general, but I do like college football, don't get me wrong, and I do support my home state Minnesota Gophers, but I don't care about it the way that I care about other sports topics for the most part. Again, had I had the opportunity to watch it in its entirety, it definitely seemed like the type of game that to anyone, anywhere in the country, knowing the storyline of the game and then, how it played out, it was highly, highly entertaining. But we're not going to go with that either. What we are going to go with tonight for Balls on Fire, what we're going with is a topic that I had very, very enthusiastically planned on spending much more time on last week. However, it fell, the order of the show topics just had it falling later in the show, and it ended up not getting its just amount of time here on the show. So in part due to that, but also in part to how it's playing out here in the early goings, we are starting Balls on Fire with NBA basketball. That's right, all the way around the league, but with a little more primary focus on my and possibly your Minnesota Timberwolves. All right, so as many of you know, I would assume by now, if you're sports fans, and I would assume you are if you're listening to a sports talk show, which you are, obviously, the Minnesota Timberwolves had to start off their season on about as somber of a note as is possible. Their head coach, who is also the president of basketball operations, one Flip Saunders, passed away the week before the season started at the way too young age of 60 years old. So, the T-Wolves, let me start with this. The NBA season, as anyone who follows it knows, is a tremendous grind. Much like the Major League Baseball season and the hockey season, but I would argue it's tougher than either one of those. It's physically more demanding than baseball, even though baseball has twice the games of hockey and basketball. But I think you're also logging, as far as a minutes standpoint, hockey and basketball play the same amount of time, or same amount of games, but a hockey player is only playing 20 to 30 minutes a game, whereas an NBA player is pushing 40 minutes or north of 40 minutes every game if they're good. So one could argue that the NBA regular season is the most grinding, grueling, toll-taking season of all the team sports. Maybe that'd be a good balls deep thought of the day. Boy, dang it. Whiffed on that one. Okay, anyway. I mention that because it separates their situation other than the obvious fatal, non-fatal fact, but it helps further separate the situation from what the Gophers are going through. The Gophers are halfway or more than halfway through their season. I want to say they're right at about the halfway point. They've got a full week in between every game. They've only got to play, 5, 6, 7 more games, something like that, not 82. So that's why I bring that up. It's a very unique, very difficult situation, about as uniquely difficult of a situation as any team could find themselves in to start a season. That's where the T-Wolves are at. So how awesome was it for this very young, with the exception of 3 guys, and very talented team to come out in their opening game. They're opening on the road in 2 games. Come out Wednesday night and beat the Lakers in LA, who, granted, they're not very good, but Kobe's back. They got talent. They beat the Lakers in LA by 1 point, 112 to 111 to start out the season. Then 2 nights later, they clobber the super crummy, and I predicted this, Denver Nuggets in Denver, 95 to 78. So they start the season 2-0, and just the other night, on Monday night, they opened their home season against the Portland Trailblazers. And there was a huge memorial honoring ceremony tribute thing to Flip Saunders before the game. That was a good, at least the video of it that I watched was 18 minutes long. So to go through all that emotionally before the game and then have to play a game is really asking a lot, but something that needed to be done. The fan base, the organization, the players, everybody needed that ceremony honoring Flip before the game. If you were here in Minnesota and you had your finger on the pulse, you would definitely know that to be true. And it was an incredible tribute. It had, I want to say, one huge video compilation for sure that I remember with just about everybody talking about Flip and what they thought of, how highly they thought of him in many different regards too. I think that's what I loved about it. Not only did you have all these other coaches like Popovich and Phil Jackson and Doc Rivers, you had players like former players of his like Chauncey Billups, analysts like Tim Legler, who were former players expressing how he regretted and never having played for Flip. That was one thing he said he wanted to do or wished he could have gotten the opportunity to do in his playing career was play for Flip Saunders. But it just went all around the basketball universe, Larry Bird, you name it. And it was so touching. One notable omission from that video was Kevin Garnett. If you listened to the show last week, you heard me discuss KG's super deep, moving, heartfelt tribute photo that he put out when Flip passed. KG apparently made attempts to get something on the video, but just couldn't get through it from being too emotional, which, knowing KG for as long as we have here in Minnesota, that is no surprise whatsoever, and I completely respect, his not being in it, and understand it, as should everybody else. No one should be upset with KG by any means for not being on there. Everyone has, the right to grieve in their own way. There was also a big, huge musical number after that where Minnesota artist Tim Mahoney, who was unrecognizable to me since we're on it. Holy cow, this guy got old and fat in a hurry, and his voice sounds like a totally different person. He's going from like freaking, he's going, God, who could I compare his voice to from before? He's going from like Adam Levine to Tom Waits, or Tom Petty or something. Like, it's ridiculous. But he still pulled off a good performance, and he wasn't the only one. But he came out and started Hallelujah, Jeff Beck style. And then Sounds of Blackness joined before it was done. There was a celloist that joined at the midway point. It was extremely well arranged and performed. It's just having a comparison for Tim Mahoney, what I'm familiar with him being as a musician and entertainer, and then what I saw on TV, it was just nothing that I had ever been exposed to before. But nonetheless, the whole entire thing was perfectly put on, just classy and just, perfect, like I said. But having said all that, like I said, you get done with all of that. That's a lot, right? That seems like a pretty sizable amount on one's plate to go through, and then to just that's done and immediately shut that off and turn on the professional athlete side of you, extremely daunting task to ask of a team or any athlete or group of athletes. And so for the most part of the game, expectedly, the Trailblazers were leading. It seemed like they were up by about 10 points or so, pretty much the whole game. But as the fourth quarter went on, and as a Minnesota fan, I kept watching the game. I'm like, God, we're just we're not playing well enough to win it, but we're still in it. We're still in it. We're still in it. We're still in it. They couldn't pull away for whatever reason, and just you couldn't help but get the feel for it. Like, this is going to be one of those where we come back and inspired, and who knows? Some might claim we get a little help. What if you believe in that kind of stuff? Whatever. I won't tell you what I do or don't believe. But it just had that feeling like we were going to come back and win it. Because other than Damian Lillard, the Blazers superstar, who I put on my top 10 MVP candidates this year, if you were listening to last week's show, which hopefully you were. But other than him, the whole rest of the team could do nothing to us, and our team as a whole was doing really good. Our bench destroyed their bench. The T-Wolves have a really talented, deep roster. And sure enough, couple minutes to go, 2 minutes to go, 1 minute to go, we're right in there. Like, we're down by 2 points. We're going to tie it up. We're going to take the lead. And then we got ref raped. And I mean, repeatedly ref raped. It was terrible. 2 calls, or I should say 2 no calls in a row regarding our rookie, Karl Anthony Towns, who is clearly going through rookie hazing processes from the NBA referees. It is absolutely ridiculous. What is a foul to or from one player should be the same exact foul to or from any other player, regardless of game situation, regardless of who the players involved are named. Okay? That is fairness. That is sportsmanship. NBA referees, they're the absolute worst. I mean, pro basketball is the only sport where you have makeup calls. Like, we're literally, at one time down the court, the refs will have a questionable out-of-bounds call or a questionable foul call. Then the very next time down the court, the second that there's anything that they can blow a whistle for, they will do it and get it going the other way again. It's the only sport that you'll ever see anything like that whatsoever. I hate it. That's one of the few things that I really hate about pro basketball. And the T-Wolves, who should be 3-0, lost Monday night in their home opener because of the refs. Like I said, 2 non-calls on Anthony Towns that both went in favor of the Blazers. Later on a super important jump ball that shouldn't have even been a jump ball, they called a stupid foul on Towns that was extremely significant. They got the game-tying tip-in on Andrew Wiggins. They took like an hour to review it and then made the wrong call that it didn't count. When from the right correct angle, you could see space in between the ball and the rim. When his hand was on it, you also saw the ball go up over the rim and then back down into the cylinder. It's just repeatedly. There was 1 or 2 other ones in there as well that they completely botched. Completely botched. The refs made somewhere between 5 to 8 completely wrong calls that all went against the T-Wolves in the final 2 minutes of the game, when the T-Wolves had all the momentum in the world, were going to tie it up and win it, and then just got stopped inexplicably by the referees. So it left a horrible taste in your mouth. If you were a T-Wolves fan, you wanted to win that game for Flip. Like I said, it felt like one of those magical moments. Like, we're going to come back and win this for Flip, and it's going to be one of those great feel-good T-Wolves are 3-0. Don't worry, we're young, and we're going to make plenty of mistakes, and that record will get evened out to more of a 500 over the course of the 82-game season. you know.